All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Sentence to Greatness podcast with your host Isaac Conaway and Marcel Zaborek. And today I am super excited that we get the chance to bring on one of the best minds in bodybuilding, in my opinion, none other than Chris Tuttle. Chris Tuttle, how are you?
Good, man. Good. How are you guys?
Good, man.
Good,
We're super
man.
excited to bring you on and cover some things that we think that need to be put out there. Um, Obviously, there's been a few things in our industry going on the past few months that kind of have been starting to raise a lot of red flags for people. Um, there's been a few unfortunate deaths, um, and I feel like it's important that we have people like you who has been a great voice for the health aspect of bodybuilding, and making sure taking care of yourself correctly. So what are your thoughts on some of the things that have been going on lately? Do you think that the past few events have been a coincidence? Is it social media hyping things up? Is it just the whole vaccination thing that's going around that people are talking about? What are kind of your thoughts on that? What do you think is going on?
All right. So first, I'm going to keep it as simple and clear as I can. So
Yes.
when scientists or researchers are studying a particular group of population, right, and
Mhm.
they're studying the mortality and morbidity rate of a population. Say if you have 1,000 deaths, and say their hypothesis is people who live near this nuclear plant, and this is the reason why they're dying. Well, clearly, out of the 1,000 people, not all 1,000 are going to be related to the nuclear plant, right? You're
Yes.
going to get people who have accidents, natural causes of death, murder, suicide, whatever have you not. So, are all the deaths we are seeing coincidence? Definitely not. Are there deaths in bodybuilding that are not related to bodybuilding? Sure, we could easily say that. We can't say that every single death is, but the linear increase in deaths in the last 5 years, it just keeps getting worse. And this was before the vaccine, and this was before COVID.
Absolutely.
And I think what many people do not understand, and where this doesn't hit them home, is like 90% of the deaths that happen in bodybuilding are not aired on social media.
Right.
Because I mean, I can tell you personally, just in my area in Connecticut, in New York, well, that's where the deaths were. Six of them, six people died, bodybuilders under the age of 35. Only one was a mass monster, and they were all died of heart related issues. So we can sit there and be like, well, if you look back, her grandmother died of a heart attack at 70. Like, we can do that all day long. But the bottom line is, if you have a predisposition to heart attack, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and you take gear, that's going to greatly exacerbate that effect and shorten that span. If your grandfather or father died at 55 years old of a heart attack, you might die at 35 years old of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what people, I think, don't realize. And whenever time someone's famous dies, that people are all broken up because they followed them, they identified with them, they in some way or another on social media developed a relationship, like they know them because of how many podcasts or how many times they see them speak or etc. So it hits home, and then they're shocked. Well, nobody should be shocked
Yeah.
um, doing what we're doing, and then we'll get into the details of what people really are doing and how
Yeah.
severe it's getting. You know.
Absolutely. So what do you think is the biggest red flag that you are personally seeing? Obviously, you have tons of clients, right? And there's clients that come to you from other coaches. There's clients that come with you from all aspects of life. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of horror stories of, what they're taking and what
Oh
they're
yeah.
doing. So what are some of the biggest red flags? Are you seeing some kind of a pattern in what's going on? What are some of the red flags that you're seeing pop up?
Well, I can personally say that what was considered a moderate dose or even a high dose in the off season for building muscle in 2005 would be considered the lightest beginner cycle of all time now. So there's progression in the sport. Okay, we
Yeah.
have
Right.
that. And then the other aspect, I think it really comes down to, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it's really the negligence of taking care of someone's health, even despite the warning signs. Um, because regardless of the amount of drugs you're intaking, if your blood work is working out and you don't have high blood pressure, obviously there's much less risk involved with something prematurely occurring than if you had somebody who was taking very little drugs and had high cholesterol, hypertension, etc. Right?
Right.
Right.
I mean, I've personally known somebody growing up that took 300 milligrams of Deca a week, and by week 4, they had to go to the hospital because they're so hypertensive.
Wow.
Wow.
Just bad genetics. Some people have bad genetics, and that's what people don't understand. Bodybuilding, they tend to point and say to somebody, well, they've been bodybuilding for 30 years. They didn't drop dead. Well, man, 40,000 people a year are admitted to the hospital through Advil and NSAIDs complications. So, I mean,
Right.
everybody's body reacts differently. So it comes down to monitoring someone's health. People just aren't doing that. They say they are, but they're not. They'll go get their lab work done once per year, once they've been on TRT for 10 weeks, or once they're off gear completely, and they're like, look, I got a clean bill of health. I'm good to go. And they get back on their treachery, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. That would be the number one. People are not taking care of their health. They're just not.
So obviously blood work is a huge thing that, well, it's one of the best tools, correct me if I'm wrong, that we can utilize to monitor our health and make sure things are going the right way. But there's a lot of people that know about that, but they neglect to do it. Ideally, how many times per year would you say a competitive bodybuilder, that competes once or twice a year, should be doing blood work? And at what points, in their season, they should be doing it?
First, everybody needs to understand that a perfect blood panel doesn't mean you're scot-free. I worked in the hospital for years. I used to work on the cardiac floor. I've seen people with perfect blood work, and they had a heart attack, right? So just make people aware. Just because your lab's mint doesn't mean you're free scot-free. But blood work is probably the easiest thing to do for a health check, and I would recommend probably doing it 4 times per year. You get your comprehensive metabolic panel plus CBC lipids, which would cover your electrolytes, your renal panel, your hepatic panel, your lipid panel, and get that all together. You can add on CRP and CPK just to see where you are in that regard. But people tend to get them checked when they're not on heavy cycles. They
Yep.
need to get them checked when they are on heavy cycles.
Right.
Don't get them checked when you're off gear. Like my dad told me one time, he's like, well, what's the point of checking your blood work when you're not taking steroids? Because it would be normal. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, my father's physician, if anybody,
Yeah.
is questioning that. But like, that makes the most sense. Obviously, you want to see what's going on internally when you're hitting it the hardest. And
Right.
I mean, I've seen tons of lab work from people 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 10 weeks out. And sometimes some people's genetics reign supreme. I've seen blood work almost near perfect outside of low HDL 3 weeks out from a show from people before.
Yeah.
That's just genetics.
Yeah.
Then you
That's
see somebody
crazy.
look at their blood work, you're like, bro, you need to get admitted to the hospital.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So what people don't realize, or a lot of bodybuilders tend to kind of forget about that part, that if you're competing, and are on cycle 8 months out of the year, right? Because honestly, there's a lot of us that do that. They do a few shows in a row. The prep itself leading up to the first show was at least 4 months. And then they go on a run of, doing a few shows. And then by the time you know it, you're on cycle for eight months out of the year. And then you come off, or you go on a TRT dose, or whatever you want to call it. And then, you don't realize, yes, but 3/4 of the year, your blood work was upside down. So you're extremely unhealthy 3/4 of the year. And then you think everything's awesome and dandy because you took, 8 to 12 weeks off of everything, and your panels looks great now. But, 3/4 of the year, you're extremely unhealthy. You're causing damage to your organs. And you're just neglecting that. You're kind of burying it deep inside your head. I've been there because I've done it before, where you kind of bury things out of sight, out of mind. You're like, well, it looks great now, so we're all good. But that's obviously not the way to go. So outside of your blood work, what are things that you recommend that us as bodybuilders need to do? It's, is it, EKGs? Is it a stress test? What are other things we need to look at?
Okay, yeah. So, real quick, so people understand, like, there might be some people listening being like, steroids don't kill people. People don't need to understand and fully grasp the fact that steroids have been numerous research studies put your body at cardiovascular risk for a cardiovascular event. It does, period. So therefore, you need to watch your blood pressure constantly. You need to try to do whatever you can to keep your lipids in check the best you can. You're never going to get your HDLs to normal range when using gear. You're just not. You can do small things to make them elevated, I mean, to help them, but and avoid certain compounds that lower them. But generally, you're not going to be able to combat the HDL lowering effects of anabolic steroids. You're just not. That's what you want to check. Those are the two things you want to be most important. Now, outside of lab work and checking your blood pressure on a regular basis, getting an echocardiogram, every year, every 2 years, getting a CT scan, your carotid artery, seeing how, that's relatively cheap. It's like $100.
Yeah.
EKG, obviously, is something that is very simple, very easy, but that doesn't always tell the whole story,
Absolutely.
But these are things that you should be able to do. And some people say, "Oh, I don't have health insurance." I mean, honestly, you should be bodybuilding, or if you don't have health insurance and you're bodybuilding, you better assume that you're basically just classifying yourself as a reckless drug user at that point, because if something happened, you don't have any money to fix it, and
Yeah.
the chances of something happening for long term would become much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. With the echogram, cardiogram, a lot of people don't know how to approach it. Do they just go to their regular doctor, ask to get one? How do you go about
It's
getting them done?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I'm self-employed, so I have horrible health insurance in regards to like what things cost. So I
Right.
just paid out of pocket. I think it was like $700. And I got a referral from my physician. And he just said, he ordered it because you need to get the referral to go to the test. But I
Yeah.
know not all places need that, because usually the referral is for the insurance company to reimburse you, right?
Okay.
Right.
So if you're going to pay out of pocket, you could roll up and be like, listen, like I need to get a cardiogram. She's like, oh, do you have an insurance card? Like, I'm paying out of pocket cash. And they're going to be like, oh, really? We'll fit you right in.
Yeah.
Because, insurance companies take forever to pay. They don't really pay full price. And they usually give you a discount. They gave me a discount. They're like, oh, you're paying up front? Oh, we'll give you a huge discount.
Right.
But you got to see how that works in your area. I
Yeah.
had a referral. I showed up and they did it and they read me the results. And basically, for those who are listening, echocardiogram, see your heart's, you can really see the left ventricle wall, the chamber wall, the width, the thickness. You can see your ejection fraction, and all that stuff. And that's important to know, because anabolic steroids tend to thicken the left ventricle wall. Now, the problem is if the left ventricle wall gets thicker and thicker and stiffer and starts to
Yeah.
grow inward, your chamber gets smaller and the amount of blood pumping out decreases. Your ejection fraction decreases. And then if you exert yourself really hard, you could have a heart attack.
Right. Um, also, how do you go about going over all those results? Obviously, 99.9% of the population does not know how to look at that, does not know how to kind of figure out their risk factors by looking at a lot of this stuff. Is it just kind of one of those things you have to just be really honest with your doctors, have them look at it and advise you properly? Because a lot of the
It's a tough
times,
one.
it's almost like in bodybuilding, it's like, well, my doctor told me this, and what you'll hear a lot of people say is like, yeah, but he doesn't know bodybuilding, that's fine. It's just bodybuilding.
Yeah, this is a tough spot for people. This is really tough. And this is why, because most doctors tend to go, bodybuilders are way over to the right, justifying and scapegoating everything, right, for risk. And then you have the doctors who are all the way over there, the other side, being like, you take testosterone cypionate, you're going to die of a heart attack and your liver is going to rot off. And then we're like, this guy doesn't tell he's talking about, right?
Right.
Right.
So then people dismiss what the doctors have to say in that regard until something severe happens. So it's really, guys, you got to weigh your choices like this. It comes down to how cool your doctor is. Some doctors are concerned and they're like, listen, like, I don't condone what you're doing, but I want you to be safe. I'll order an echocardiogram. Then you get some doctors who be like, I'm not supporting your steroid use by ordering these tests for you so you continue to use your drugs.
Yeah.
Then they might freak out and do that.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, if you admit to your doctor about anabolic steroids, it could potentially knock off your ability to get life insurance later in life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy's an avid steroid user. So you have to weigh the options in that regard. And that's the difficult part, So that's what you guys have to make as a choice, because it's you and your doctor. And another thing too, most people don't have general practitioners, GPs. I
Right.
advise you guys get one, and get one you have a relationship with that you like. Because
Mhm.
I have some clients who have badass doctors, man. Like,
Right.
they'll flat out say, like, listen, I'm not prescribing you shit, and I think what you're doing is stupid, but I'll order you lab work and I will make sure that your blood pressure's in check and give them what they need to in that regard. And then you get some doctors who are like, I'm dropping you as a patient, which I think is illegal, but people do it.
Absolutely. So, after you kind of get all that stuff done, right? You feel like you have the green light to go to, obviously run a cycle or get back on gear, whatever it is. Once you get back on the cycle, you know, once again, a lot of people tend to just kind of put everything, behind, well, my blood work looked good, I'm good to go. Is there, certain compounds or things that you need to stay away from, or you should, not abuse? Or is there any safer compounds in your opinion that you have a less of a risk per se of, running into issues? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, this is gonna not be popular. But
Right.
number one is I have no idea why people use tren in the off season. I don't get it. I don't understand. If you can't grow, if you need tren to grow in the off season, then I honestly think you probably shouldn't be bodybuilding. Um,
Right.
there's so many other things that you can use that will be beneficial. Tren is pretty harsh on the body overall. You're going to get your body used to it. It's going to be high blood pressure when you already have high body weight and you're trying to eat a lot of food, which can affect appetite and digestion because it's so androgenic. I think people should avoid that in the off season. I think people should also avoid orals or use the bare minimum possible because of their lipid altering effects. The liver damage associated with them, I mean, we can safely say that bodybuilders aren't dying from liver disease, right?
Right.
They're dying from kidney disease. They're dying of heart attacks. So that comes way first before cirrhosis of the liver. I'm sure there's people out there that destroy the liver through steroids, but I mean, that's not very common.
Yeah.
Oral steroids, I just don't think in the off season they really have a really big application. I think they should be saved more for contest prep. When you do need to be dry and hard and implement the, Anavar, oxandrolone, or halotestin. But in the off season, staying with the basic things, norandurones, testosterones, primobolan, masteron, those tend to be not as harsh on the body overall in regards to lipids and blood pressure, but it's the dose dependent effect. The
Yeah.
more oil you use, the more lipid altering effects you might see. And obviously there's a genetic component as well. You'll get your HDLs might dip a little bit, your LDLs might go up a little bit, but sometimes the LDL increasing effect of oils is related to the mass quantities of food we're eating in the off season,
Yeah.
the caloric surplus itself.
Right.
And then of course, the biggest thing that people abuse and I don't know why they just don't get the gyno surgery is aromatase inhibitors. What do we know about aromatase inhibitors? They destroy lipids.
Lipids,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they affect bone density, and they do a bunch of horrible things. Not to mention they lower the effectiveness of a cycle. So you
Yeah.
get a lot of people that load up on AIs to try to prevent and stop gyno, which they don't and won't. They minimize it, and they crash their estrogen in the off season to look drier and take extra compounds, and they're putting themselves at severe cardiovascular risk just as much as they would be in the contest prep, tearing up a bunch of orals.
Right.
I think that people should spend the money and get the gyno removed or combat it. And probably there's other options you can use to combat it. Probably tamoxifen would be a better option in that regard.
Yeah.
Or just don't use so many aromatase drugs.
Yeah. So ideally in the off season, because I've heard this both ways, or I've seen it both ways. Let's just put it that way. I've seen this in plans. Ideally in the off season, would you want to be able to run your entire off season without any AIs?
That ideally that would be wonderful. I can tell you the people that I see grow the fastest tend to be the ones that are little to no AIs.
Okay.
I have a
Right.
couple friends that grew substantially, like crazy.
Yeah.
Zero Novadex, zero Remidex.
Huh. Yeah. It seems like in our industry, everybody's just scared of the word estrogen, period. Everybody's like, oh, well, my estrogen's
Well, it's
going to
like
get
everybody's
high.
worried about gyno, and they don't want to be puffy, because
Right.
Instagram they got to look a certain way. So there's a different desire and need to appeal all the time. Where when bodybuilding in 2005 and earlier on, people disappeared in the off season. There was no social media. You can
Yeah.
get as chubby as you want,
Right. Right.
And then now people have more obligations, and everybody just seems to think that like, oh, I got to take letrozole to stop my gyno, to shrink my gyno, make my gyno go away. Once your gyno's there, it's not going away with any AI. People associate reduction in inflammation with it going away. No, it's just not inflamed. the tissue is still there. It's not going anywhere until it's removed.
So if you get it removed, does it come back?
Well, this is the theory on that. So everybody hears, well, if you remove the gland completely, then it won't come back, right? I did not get my gland completely removed. Mine's never come back. I know people who they say the gland was removed by the physicians, whether it was or not, and it did come back, but probably meant that there's still tissue there, right? My father removed mine, believe it or not. He never did it before, but he's like, I'll give it a shot.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you do it at home?
He had his flannel on and jeans, and he did some local anesthesia and just cut it around the nipple and scraped it out. But he said he couldn't get all the tissue because of where the location was on the left pec. And then he did the best he could, but it never had a problem ever again. And most of my clients, most people I know that have gotten it, it doesn't come back.
Right.
Yeah.
You always have outliers, though, you know?
Right. Right, Chris. So, I mean, for people that are listening that don't know any better, there are two types of way of getting gyno, right? You can get gyno from like nandrolone, 19 Nors, and you can get obviously gyno from like the DHT. Like, can you explain to people like the difference in like the gyno you can get or breast tissue buildup? Because I know me personally, if I'm running some 19 Nors, like say if it's MPP in the off season, I tend to have very sensitive nipples and I feel it start to come along, and then I have to.
Yeah. So first off, almost everybody has some type of breast tissue, and that usually grows most through puberty at first. People who haven't, because we all seen people who have gyno who've never used gear. We've also seen people who have gyno who are obese because fat mass converts testosterone to estrogen. Therefore, the breast tissue in the male will grow even without the presence of anabolic steroids. And then people who smoke tons and tons of weed can grow bitch tits too. But in regards to bodybuilders, aromatase drugs like testosterone and D-bol and things that convert testosterone to estrogen rise, the estrogen will bind to the breast receptor tissue and grow. 19 Nors looks great on paper, but high prolactin can indirectly stimulate estrogen. And then that's why a lot of people get real puffy nipples and have issues with 19 Nors, even with Tren, and then have breast tissue growth. And some people more susceptible than others, man. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen people have minor gyno just from puberty, and you can feel it, but you can't really see it until they're very, very lean, and it never grows. Yeah. Then you get some people, they take one shot of testosterone and their nipples blow up, Wow. Probably has to do with more genetics and how much aromatase enzyme they have in their body. I don't know, but that's more of an anecdotal level.
Gotcha. So let's say you do get them removed, right? And kind of what caused it. Like Isaac said, he knows that, if he runs NPP or a 19 Nor, he'll start feeling it. Can you go back to using those things at that point?
Oh, you mean once it's removed? Yeah.
Yeah. Once it's removed, you could safely go back to that. Yeah, it's good to know. I feel like, I actually didn't know that once you get it removed, it won't come back. I never actually thought about that until now. So it's good to know.
It doesn't happen very often. I can tell you, I can only name probably 2 people where it came back. And one of them, it was never completely gone. Like after he got it done, I looked at it. I'm like, dude, did he get the right side? He's like, yeah. I'm like, it doesn't look like it.
Oh, man. That's
so
then you got to get back under and get the rest of that out.
That sucks. Because some doctors charge a lot of money for it, and oh yeah, for those guys who are looking for the surgery, shop around. It's your plastic surgeon that will usually do it. And you can request to see if you can be awake, like me. A lot of people do that, and that takes away the anesthesiologist, and that saves a few grand, way down. Some will do that, some won't, and of course, the severity of your gyno will determine also a cost. I've had clients pay $2,500 to get both done, done, and I've also had clients get paid $7,000 to get it done.
Wow. So bottom of the line is try not to get gyno if you don't if you don't have to.
Yeah, correct. Another thing too, people think you can only get gyno on cycle. A lot of people get gyno off cycle. When they come off, they don't come off properly, and estrogen shoots through the roof.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes, honestly, where a lot of it will come from at the end of the cycle. Testosterone bottoms out, estrogen goes way up, and they just get, and it's donezo.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, speaking of coming off properly, I'm glad that you brought that up, because this is another thing that's a reoccurring, question that we get from a lot of people is, well, what's the best thing I should do? Should I go down to a TRT dose? Should I run a full PCT cycle? Should I just stay on gear the entire year because I want to be IFBB Pro in 5 years? What is, in your opinion, the best way to go about this? I get it. We're bodybuilders. We all have goals. We're driven, in a weird way to do things. But what's the right way of doing this?
All right. So it's a personal decision one, and I'm going to explain it. So I personally think that anybody who's young, under the age of 26, should always come off. I get these kids come to me who are like 19, 20, 21, 22, and they're like, "Oh, I'm on my bridge. I'm cruising right now." I'm like, "You're like 21 years old. Like, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Like, like they could probably come off on nothing and then feel fine,
Right.
And that's a problem, because obviously when we're young, we don't make the best decisions.
Mhm.
Anybody who's in their 30s can admit that.
Yeah.
So if you rely on it and you don't come off, there's going to be a high % chance you're going to be dependent on it forever. And at the time, people are going to be like, "Well, I don't care. Bodybuilding's what I want to do." Bodybuilding's 10 to 15 years of your life tops. Then you have the rest of your life after that. I've had numerous people reach out to me after the post I made recently, the video, and they said, I regret bodybuilding. I regret what it did to me. I regret staying on. I'm dependent on it. I've numerous times. So people who are listening, think about that choice in regards to, if you're getting into the bodybuilding arena and you're starting to use these compounds, you might want to really come off. And if you continue to bodybuild for years and years, then you can ultimately make that decision again later. But that's not something that you should immediately do on your first and second cycle. It's just not. Now, in regards to that, so here's two trains of thought. People go on gear, they're on super physiological doses of hormones, and obviously that's potentially not good for you, but that's what you need to be in bodybuilding to build muscle. And then one train of thought is, well, you have to come off all the way, bottom out really hard to refreshen your receptors and get your body to adjust. And yes, there is some belief to that. I don't know if it's true. I really don't. It's anecdotal, but I think to some degree there's some merit in that. And then on the health standpoint, there's an argument where, well, if you're going one part of the year going really, really high above, and that's unhealthy, then the other part of the year you're rock bottom, which we also know is very unhealthy, because being extremely low testosterone obviously is a cardiovascular risk in itself. That's related to a bunch of cardiovascular risks as well. So now there's no part in the year where you're in a reasonable standpoint of health. Super high to super low, super high, super low.
Yeah.
So then you have the other aspect, people being like, well, I think going on to a hormone replacement. Now, guys, a true hormone replacement, not 500 milligrams of testosterone a week.
That's not TRT.
Not 300 milligrams of testosterone a week. A true TRT, where your blood levels are within the normal limits.
Mhm.
That's normal, not 1200, within the normal limits. So that puts somebody anywhere from 100 to 250 milligrams per week, depending on that individual body's response. So then they do the TRT, which brings them down to normal levels. And obviously a lot of internal parameters would normalize at that point. And then you would never enter a low point. So you don't get the depression, the sadness, or feel weak and soft, and you feel more normal. You feel more like a mortal man. You're not going to feel like you're on cycle. And then you bridge the gap to the next cycle. It's two trains of thought, and those are the options that people, I don't recommend one or the other. I just recommend that people really need to make a decision and know the facts of what they're getting into with either one of them.
Right.
Now, I will say, does coming down onto TRT or a cruise, so to speak, is that going to be a huge benefit in regards to building massive amounts of muscle versus coming all the way on and off? It will at a point. Yeah. There comes to a point in the size of a man where the amount of androgens needs to be at a certain level to maintain that mass. Meaning, if you're a middleweight, a light heavyweight, potentially even a heavyweight, and you're coming on and off all the way, there's potentially you could still make gains there. Now, you're a super heavyweight, probably not.
Right.
When you're pushing the envelope to serious muscle mass, the ability to come all the way off and sustain that amount of muscle mass is probably not possible.
Yeah.
Because, again, people have to understand that, like, huge guys, it's taken time to get there. You don't jump to, whatever crazy amount of gear they're taking, and you think you're going to be that in there in a year. That takes a long time of steadily ramping up androgens as the body needs it to sustain that size. And then it's going to need a little bit more between those periods to keep that size.
Gotcha. Now, hey, Chris, so everybody's TRT levels, or dosage, I should say, can be very dependent, right? Like, are there guys that have to run like a TRT of, like, say, I don't know, 350 milligrams for their range, for them to be in that range that you speak of? Is that, or does it always have to be 200 and under,
If somebody needs to run 350 milligrams a week to keep their levels within normal limits, that means their underground gear is very underdosed.
Okay.
I mean, I have a lot of clients that are on hormone replacement through their doctor that don't even bodybuild, and not one of them is over 200 milligrams a week.
Gotcha.
And this is about 40 clients or more. One of them's on 50 milligrams a week, and his testosterone came back at 900.
Oh, God.
So everybody responds differently, but they're also getting gear right from the pharmacy. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Which some people argue is not very good compared to some undergrounds, but it's all men dosage. But the only one way to know is to check. And, depending what state you live in, you can order your own free testosterone and total testosterone for like $40 on private MD labs or directlabs.com and check it to see where you're at. Because sometimes it's good to know, because if you feel too good, it might be an indicator that you're probably north of 1200,
Right.
You're like, wow,
Yeah.
this TRT bridge is going great. I feel like I'm on cycle. That's because you are.
Yeah. So it's not size dependent, because once again, it's another thing that has gone around, is I've seen it. Well, it's size dependent. If Big Ramy, he's 300 pounds. His TRT would be at like 500.
Okay. So that's kind of what I said before. So he said in regards to within normal limits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So within normal limits, nobody really is going to be above 200 unless it's an anomaly.
Okay.
Now, per week, that is. Now, somebody like Ramy's TRT or whatever he's doing is probably higher anybody that size, because you need a larger amount of androgens to sustain that size.
Okay.
You have to. Like, nobody's going to sustain 290 pounds at 150 milligrams a week of testosterone,
Right.
Mhm.
Especially if they're going to be off for an extended period of time. It's just not a reality in that regard. I mean, at that regard, you're really pushing the limits of health, of course. And
Right.
I always tell people the best example of that is a race car. You get a Honda Civic, for every $1,000 you put into that transmission has a little bit more higher percent of blowing that transmission.
Yep. Exactly. People like numbers as well, like, because a lot of questions that we answer, obviously it's not in depth like your understanding is, but a lot of people ask for almost like absolutes. They want absolute answers. Well, how much I should take, how long should I stay off, how long should I stay on? So for you, what's like the general rule of thumb that you can not safely, it's hard to say because it's so person dependent, but when people come off gear, they take a break or they go to a TRT dose, what are the things that they need to look for before they can kind of give themselves, a green light to get back on cycle, get back into prep, whatever is that they're doing? Is it a time thing? Obviously, like, should it be at least 4 months? Should it be the same amount that you're, doing a cruise, the same amount of time that you were on cycle? Because there's so many conflicting things that people are talking about.
And that's one thing that's tough. And, people requesting absolute answers. That's with everything, where people don't want to do the research. They want to be told what to do.
Right.
I mean, I get that with nutrition all the time. Chris, what's the best diet? Well, whoa, like, best diet?
Yeah.
Chris, what's better, steady state cardio or HIIT cardio? It's like, well, they both have their application.
Mm-hmm.
People just want that exact answer, and really to give people insight so they can make their own decision in that regard is, if you do decide to remain on hormone replacement dosages between a cycle, you really should minimum of 8 weeks. And I would suggest probably even longer at that point, considering you still have an exogenous form of testosterone in your body.
Yeah.
Some people will argue, well, I have a contract and I have to do a show and I have to do this, I have to do this appearance. So I'm like, that's the decision you have to make, and that's the health you're putting to your risk to your health. But the biggest mistake people make is they come back onto a cruise TRT
Yeah.
for 4 weeks. It's like you've done nothing in 4 weeks. Your levels just went to normal after that 4-week mark.
Yeah.
And what some people don't understand too, which is interesting, if they come off gear completely zero.
Yeah.
Sometimes by the 4th and 5th week, their testosterone's really high because their body somehow is compensating for such a low amount and it's dumping. And then all of a sudden by week 8, they feel like shit. And they're like, what's going on?
Right.
And then they check their testosterone's rock bottom.
Yeah.
You know? And that's even sometimes without PCT. I've seen that before with people. And then if people come all the way off, people, there's thoughts of equal time on, equal time off. Mm-hmm. Would that be the healthiest route probably to take? Probably. Yeah. Is it honestly going to be an effective route? I'm not going to lie to you. Probably not.
Yeah. You probably take a few steps backwards, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also genetics reign supreme, dude. We all know people that run a cycle, they gain 30 pounds, they come off, they lose 5, and they don't take gear for 6 more months, and they take another cycle and they put on another 10, Right. You get those people.
Yeah.
And then you asked about cycle length, right? Total cycle
length?
Yes,
cycle length, right. You get one absolute answer.
Yeah, it's a range, honestly, because most people that do a prep will be on 20 weeks before a show. So like that includes like introduction to off season into prep.
Right.
Some people are on 6 months out of the year. Is that a cycle that people should be doing? No, I honestly think that like 8 weeks is too little. I would say between 10 to 14, you can be at average. 16 to 18, pushing it. But again, this is checking your health parameters. This is very dependent also on your bodybuilding goals, where you are as a bodybuilder. But I mean, guys, if you're just getting into bodybuilding, like it should be no longer than 10 weeks. Do you know what I mean? It just shouldn't.
Right.
You should be smart and careful what you're doing and maximize the gains. The thing about oils is they don't really start really working until week 3, 4, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden week 5, 6, 7 is like, this is great. And then it tapers off. But what people I think making the mistake of is they'll go on cycle and they run it and it's like week 20 and they really haven't made any strength gains or any size gains in the last 6 weeks. I'm like, at that point, it's kind of time to be like, we need to back off, reset, pull the plug, and then change a different approach. Because at some point, of every cycle, you reach a point where the body's just stuck. It's not going to gain any more. And just staying on and pushing weights and living is not going to do anything except prolong your break and prolong more progress.
Gotcha.
What if you're doing, like, you're in your off season, right? Because you said 16, 20 weeks, you haven't made much gains for the past 6 weeks. What if at that point you have to start your prep?
Well, you should be better planning. Yeah. I get that. Someone comes to you and they're like, hey man, like, I want to do a show in 16 weeks. Then I'm like, and then you look at their stats, like, dude, you've been on gear for 20 weeks. No. Right. People got a plan. And what's weird is way back in the day when I first started bodybuilding, people used to map out their entire year. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you map out the whole 12 months on a spreadsheet and you're like, this is the show date. This is the show date. And then you have your projected starts of whatever and your projected off periods. And then you'd stick to that. Yeah. Nowadays, you get people who are like, think I'm going to do a show in 12 weeks. Fuck it. I'm just going to jump in the show. And then they start taking more stuff when they've already were taking trend in the off season and they're continuing to take trend all the way into the show.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's gotten out of control. It really has gotten out of control.
So
now you think this is just total lack of education? Because I mean, now it's crazy because obviously there's more information available to us more now than there ever has been, right? And you know what I mean? And why are people messing this up? Like there's so much information available to us.
I do think the deaths that we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. I think it's going to rapidly increase in the next 5-6 years. I think people that you and I see all the time on all the social media now that are big names, I think that's once they reach mid 40s, 50s, I think it's adios muchachos, because the amount that people are doing is absurd. It's absurd. Even guys that I know personally who've been in the top 5, 10 Mr. Olympia look at me and they're like, dude, the things that people are doing now, like we didn't do that.
Right.
You know,
Wow.
People always speculate because you have jackasses in the forums running their mouth and they never competed before saying that this is during H's cycle, you know,
Yeah.
and then people believe it. But God, what was the question again? I had a good answer for that.
The lack of education, yeah.
So I think it's actually social media's perception of anabolics. I think because it's become so much more mainstream and accepted that it's become more like weed. It's just weed. Oh, I'll just smoke weed. It's not a big deal. Like, because think about weed now, like it was 10 years ago. It's like you get arrested for possession and paraphernalia.
Right.
And now it's just dude, I'm high as fuck. And then like your mom doesn't even care, you know, because it's just a thing.
Right.
I think people are downplaying it. And social media has come out to the forefront that like, this is what everybody's doing. Everybody's alive. Everybody looks awesome. They have great cars, Instagram. They get chicks. And it's just become just a common thing. Like, I can't tell you how many people come up to me in the gym or come up to some of my friends in the gym who are like, kids, dude, 18 to 21. Bro, should I run trend for my first cycle? It's like, how about maybe learn how to bench press properly? Maybe learn how to train properly. Like, you've been training for 6 months. I just think it's become more of an acceptable thing. Like, I see
drinking
people
alcohol.
I've seen people mentioning things on social media. Oh, this guy's on trend. You look at his dude's profile and he's like a computer dweeb. A computer dweeb, when I was young, would have no idea what testosterone or trend even is. It just becomes more of a mainstream thing. And I think that's where people kind of devalue the danger of it. They don't think it's as dangerous. It's just like drinking alcohol a little bit here and there. It's not going to hurt. Oh, this is what you do. Because think about it, right? You drink too much alcohol, you get alcohol poisoning. You get too high, you're going to be bugging out. # mental challenge, right? You take too much D-ball testosterone, you're going to get bloated and feel fuller and bigger and some side effects. But the side effects that it's actually doing to you ain't coming till later, like smoking cigarettes, right? You smoke a pack of butts, you're like, I don't have cancer. Yeah, you smoke a couple packs of butts for 5-10 years, you're like, shit, I got cancer.
Yeah.
So steroids are more similar to that in that regard. And then also people, these forums, I think, are partly to blame. I think social media is partly to blame. I think some people coming out and saying, this is what everybody's doing, and this is why they're big. And I also think you have an aspect of society wanting quick fixes. And I also think that you have general misunderstanding of genetics.
Yeah.
People look at Phil Heath, that dude's on everything. He's probably not.
Right.
Joe Blow at my amateur show got like 5th place in light heavyweight class and wasn't in good condition, was probably on twice as much. Genetics.
Yeah.
Some people are born a Ferrari. Some people are born a Volkswagen Beetle. If you're a Volkswagen Beetle, bro, there ain't any amount of drugs you're going to take to make it look like a Ferrari. You're just going to end up dying at 50,000 miles, you know?
Right.
So once again, you know, people have a hard time understanding of what's too much. And, you know, we know that that's different for everybody. But, you know, do you think that also competitors are placing a lot of trust now into coaches, right? They're not really
100%.
educating themselves. They're just kind of giving the free reins to the coach. All right, coach, let's go. I'll do whatever you tell me. I want to be the best, which is, you know, it's a mentality that a lot of us have as bodybuilders. You know, do you think that as competitors, should we start taking more responsibility for, like, you know, if a coach prescribes you, you know, 800 milligrams of Tren a week, and if that doesn't raise a red flag to you, it's like, well, that's your own fault, or is that your coach's fault? Whose fault is that?
That's a tough one. I can tell everybody who's listening, the fitness industry as a whole lacks integrity majorly because it's a self-absorbing sport. So people who are very self-absorbed tend to behave and act what represents them best. So as a coach, better shredded looking clients makes them look better.
Yeah.
So you get, I call them chem coaches. coaches that will just do everything possible drug-wise, take away as much food as possible, do as much cardio as possible, and see what sticks to the wall to the most amount of people as possible. More money, more fame in your face. I think it's a little both. And the problem is this. In my aspect, I think about it. If I hire an electrician,
Yeah.
I'm hiring him because he has expertise that I don't know.
Right.
I expect him not to burn my house down, right?
Yep.
It's like I'm paying you not to burn my house down to make it work. So, some arguments go, well, I'm paying the coach to win. I don't give a fuck about my health. Well, okay, that's your prerogative. Then go work with a chem coach. But I do think it's both. I mean, self-responsibility is obviously number one, but anybody getting into bodybuilding can't kid yourself. If you think this is a healthy sport or you think that you're not taking years off your life, you are stupid. You're blinded by the whole recognition, feeling big, feeling strong, making progress. Putting drugs into the body like bodybuilders do for extended period of time is taking years off your life.
Yeah.
You might live to be 70, but you sure as hell ain't gonna live to 95. Like you might, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's where people need to realize going in. And then if you're going in, you want to choose a coach for that reason. But I'm happy, though. I do feel that there's change in coaching because I put out the information or my persona that I'm more on the health conscious side. So I don't get drug addicts. I get people who are like, man, like I want to compete, but I want to have a family and kids one day. I want to be like older and I want to take a better approach. Or I've had people come to me admitted to the hospital coming from a name brand coach you and I know every day. We see every day on Instagram with acute renal failure, rhabdomyolysis. One of them got congestive heart failure under the age of 30. And they're like, oh, can you fix me? It's like, dude, your kidneys are rocked. They're done. Like bodybuilding's done,
Yeah.
And these things happen much more than people think. I'm friends with a lot of coaches, but I can think of two other coaches specifically that had at least four people last year with kidney failure that they came to them from other big name coaches because they're cooked. That coach didn't express the importance of checking blood pressure, and they let it ride. There's one coach that looked at the blood work, looked at the creatinine being like 2.4, and was like, dude, you're fine, you're straight. Here, just take kidney stuff. Take this supplement, you'll be fine. And then ultimately he went into renal failure. So it's chronic kidney disease, rather. Not a kidney failure completely yet, but it's both, man. If there's something you're looking at a cycle and it looks suspicious to you, you might want to ask, hey, is this something that is something I shouldn't do? Because I feel a lot of people don't understand the full ramifications of it. Specifically women. I mean, women are doing fish and 2 hours of fish and greens, crazy low calories, 2 hours of cardio a day, over 100 micrograms of T3, Clen, DNP, all this crazy shit to get shredded. And then they mess up their voice permanently. They grow panoris. They get facial hair.
Panoris.
And they're like, I want my trophy. And then all of a sudden when they decide not to compete anymore, like 4 or 5 years, because let's be honest, most of the time women's physique, they're not competing for 10 years.
No.
They're done in like 3 to 5. And then after that, then what? Then what?
Right.
You lose your muscle mass, you still have those permanent side effects, not to mention the side effects of your heart and obviously all the recent deaths with diuretics and stuff. But you trust your coach in the regard, you do, and you listen. But if there's something that you feel uncomfortable with, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much more you can do with nutrition and diet. And working with the Chris Tuttle really opened my eyes to that. Like people wouldn't even believe me, like what he recommended for me to use. They wouldn't even believe it. I had to call Jose and ask if this was a joke. And Jose's like, no, it's not a joke. Just listen to it. Trust me. It's weird, but just trust me. I'm like, all right. But he manipulated nutrition like crazy, and I got in great shape with little to no cardio. Well, I did some cardio. I still had decent food in my diet, and I didn't push supplements hard at all. And then I worked with Andrew Vu. I didn't do any cardio at the end. And I was eating crazy amount of food all the way through, just cycling it properly and feeding the body when it needs to be fed, managing fatigue and so forth. And things work great. Unfortunately, you get a lot of coaches who take too many people on, and they use chems as a crutch, and they just pull food. Oh wait, I'll have a burger and fries. Pull food. Here, do more cardio. Here, up your T3. Add this in. Add that in. You know what? Add ephedrine in too, and yohimbine, and all these together.
Yeah.
And then it's just like fuck. I used to diet a lot of natural bodybuilders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, I'm used to having to do that. And then I've been to natural pro bodybuilding shows where dudes are peeled, glutes. That's zero drugs.
Yeah.
So it's like clearly it can be done, right?
Right.
And obviously, if you're enhanced and you diet like that, you're just a bigger version of that guy, right?
Right.
So I think too many people overemphasize that. And one of the things you said before, where you're like, "A coach, I'll do anything." They'll take anything, but they're not going to do the crazy amount of cardio or the diet like
Very
they
true.
need to, right?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the subject of, you mentioned women in particular, transitioning a woman from prep to off season. I got laughed at a long time ago. My wife came off her first show, and I said, "Hey, it was a Facebook group, and I didn't know what to do about it. I was still fairly new to women and all that stuff, and they just laughed when I asked, is there any way to PCT a woman, or how to transition her off?" And everybody just kind of laughed at me and thought I was like an idiot. And they're like, "Oh, you just come off everything and that's it. What do you think?" What do you do for women coming off shows?
Okay,
that are on
so
here?
I know what you were thinking, and they took it as something else. They took that as in, how do we get her normal testosterone back?
Right.
Their response was,
exactly.
you don't need to, because no, you're thinking like, well, how do I transition this poor woman who's hitting it hard, diet and cardio, and maybe she's taking something, maybe she wasn't, to introducing back into normal life without blowing up? That's what she meant. Because I can tell you, women have the worst time and the hardest time psychologically, because they are getting pretty damn lean now, shredded. And a woman coming off, obviously with estrogen, their normal genetics, being a female, body fat comes on crazy quick. And then their muscle mass will drop, and their whole body looks distorted, and they look, their butt gets deflated, and they look very off, and they psychologically go crazy. And they're like, I got to do my cardio. I gotta get back on Anavar. I got to do this.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't help women much anymore for this reason. I personally have a little moral integrity dilemma with I don't want to recommend what people are doing today to be competitive. I just don't want to have any part of that, to a female standpoint. I have a couple females that help. They're great, but they got genetics on their side for sure. But weaning off things, if they're taking something, wean off slowly, carefully, because how many people control themselves 2 weeks after the show? Probably 1%, right?
Right.
They go crazy. So if a female's coming off everything, just cold turkey, and then they're eating, their physique's going to change in 2 weeks as fast as it changed in 16 weeks prior to the show.
Right.
So it's probably pretty wise to start weaning off things slowly. Obviously, you could probably drop anything that's dangerous they're taking. But if they were taking T3, you definitely want to slowly taper that off. You could drop Clen. If you're taking Anavar or Winstrol, you probably want to taper that down slowly, gradually. I mean, if a woman's taking, say if a woman was taking 20 milligrams of Stanzanol a day, bring it down to 10 or 5 milligrams, and wean off of it until she's back into training, getting a little more sleep, diet's cleaning up, so that way everything doesn't impact them all at once,
Right.
It's tough, man, because, it's a tough situation, because you get people who are so determined. I want to do that. That's me. That's my bucket list. I want to win. And then they get so enthralled with anything it takes to get there. And then they get there and they do it a few times and they realize shit, I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who are listening, I can't tell you how many women think that after the fact. There are women that don't, and that's fine. But you got to be careful not to climb that drug pyramid too quickly,
Right.
And really be careful what you're doing.
Gotcha.
Now, how do you go about the hormonal part of it? Is there anything, I guess the question would be, is there anything you can do about the hormonal part of it?
For women?
Yeah, because their hormones are,
Right.
after prep, they're going to be jacked up, whether they're on gear or off gear, just that push through prep, they're going to be somewhere else hormonally.
This puts it in perspective. I have to go to get my continuing education credits for my RD, and we attended a seminar on the effects starvation has hormonally in females and men.
Mhm.
These aren't bodybuilders. These are female gymnasts, and these were comparing special forces men who were completely deprived in Ranger school the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Long story short, the men going through the special forces boot camp at the end, I think 80% of them had extremely low testosterone, cortisol's through the roof, all this shit's nuts. Their lean body mass was down a significant amount. Their whole body mass was down. Within 3 weeks, they were all normal. Okay. The
Right.
women who went through a similar rigor of low calorie or low body fat percent of the time took up to 6 months to recover or longer.
Wow.
And that wasn't even used with gear.
Right.
You get some females who will menstruate the day of the show. They never lose their cycle. That's great. Their body's bulletproof in that regard. But you have to get their diet back. You got to pay attention to the diet. You got to pay attention to managing fatigue and recovering your body's stress from prep to come back. There's not really much you're going to be able to do or manipulate supplement-wise to get them to menstruate again, besides going to the OBGYN, getting a progesterone shot to help them get their cycle going again. But man, it just takes time. But I think the issue comes post-show with women is they feel they continue need to restrict calories and dietary fat because they're gaining weight too quickly.
Right.
And then what prolongs that hormone recovery. Some people, some females in that regard, even with no drugs, still won't recover their normal hormone cycles for a long time. I used to diet a lot of female figure competitors, natural, and I remember one specific girl, she didn't get her period back for I think 14 months, and she went back to normal body fat relatively. She was already generally lean as it is, but that rocked her,
Yeah.
and then she just
Right.
didn't get it back.
Because there's a correlation, right, between obviously female body fat and their hormones and their menstrual cycle, right? There's a big
Yeah,
correlation there. So
huge.
so
They get a
because
certain body fat, they'll just won't menstruate. Yeah.
right, because a lot of females when they do diet, they'll ask us saying, hey, I'm dieting hard. I don't have my period. I haven't taken any drugs. Like, what is going on? Am I gonna fall apart and die? Or it's is it just one of those things where you're like, okay, well, we have to toughen it out to the show, and then post show you're gonna have to take a period of recovery time, where we get your body fat back up to kind of like hemostasis, and let your body do the work of recovering
Yeah,
and
yeah.
coming back up.
It's consistent. It has to be consistent. And that's with calories and training. If you're training super hard and you're still kind of calorie restricting, not really going to come back. It's just not. And again, ladies, if you're listening, every female is different.
Right.
I've had females have periods week before the show. And then you have some that are natural competitors, and they lose their period the second they drop their calories, and they still have decent amount of body fat. Everybody's a little different, but generally it's related to long periods of caloric deficit and body fat percent. It is. And of course, stress. Let's be honest. Doing an hour cardio, hour training, calorie deficit for extended period of time, that taxes the female body.
Yeah.
It
Right.
really does, and it will come back. But they have to understand, you guys have to understand, females out there, that this is most likely going to happen. It's going to most likely take time to come back. And is competing healthy for a female? Definitely not healthy. It's
Yeah.
Right.
pushing your body, Stan Efferding said the best thing. We're not competing to be healthy. We're competing to win. Right. And there's a large degree of that is true,
Right.
Absolutely.
So basically keep calories, not too restricted. Cut training down probably, 2 to 3 times a week. Nothing crazy, no failure stuff, and
Yeah, exactly.
keep
Yeah.
cardio relatively low, so they're not stressing. That's probably the best approach for most, right?
Yeah. So for those who are listening, it's obviously dependent on how much cardio you were doing, how much
Right.
calories you were eating,
Yeah.
and what you were doing, which would determine your rate of progression coming out of the show, of course. Okay. So don't make it a black and white thing where it would be this specific thing to do. It'd be
Right.
like a taper. And of course, you judge how you feel. And I don't think you should be failure training 4 weeks post show anyway.
No.
I think it should be just, reps in reserve, maybe 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 1 to 2, and maybe single joint exercises, 2 to 3 on multi joint exercises, and prioritizing recovery and relaxing, spending certain days doing relaxing things. Because as competitors, we tend to be like, got to put the off season in, got to get to work, got to get to work, got to get to work.
Yeah.
And then Sunday, it's like, what can I do today to benefit me? Versus like, maybe I'm going to go to a pumpkin patch today. I'm not going to think about competing. Maybe I'm going to go to a comedy film and just not think about competing.
Yeah.
Getting your mind and stress out of it slowly. That's the way to go. But the biggest mistake ever is keeping the cardio high and then keeping your calories low because you binged ate and you're trying to counter what you binged eat, and then you're falling in this yo-yo. That's the worst possible thing that you can do that so many people fall into.
Right. Gotcha. That's good.
I know we had a few questions too that some people asked us.
Yeah.
I know Isaac wrote down a few. We touched on a few as well. So let's see what else we could get answered for people, because there are some good ones.
Yeah. First one is, does your wife troll you all the time?
Oh my God, all the time. All the time. We work from each other. We work home with each other. We're with each other legitimately 24/7. So It's constant banter. And it's like, it's sometimes you're just like, you want to be serious. And you're like, yo, why is this like this? And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. Okay, pussy. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I get a serious answer. She's like, that is a serious answer.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you plan on boxing ever again? You plan on going back into boxing?
I just started again. I'm very lucky, actually. It was so crazy moving here. And then I have a business venture, which I'll talk about at the end. I've been working on, and with my clients, I've had probably the most clients I've had compete this year and the most wins I've had this year. So I've been really paying attention to that. And then moving across the country is one thing. Unpacking is a whole nother, because you're like, I don't know if it goes there. It doesn't go there. Okay. Then you tend to unpack until things are functional, and then you stop. And then all of a sudden there's still boxes everywhere. But I just started boxing this last week. I found an awesome coach. One of Vu's clients reached out to me, asked me if I wanted to train. I said, dude, I'm not really bodybuilding anymore, man. I just do some training here and there, some more, functional shit, but I still do my basic bodybuilding exercises twice a week. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, I'm new to the area. Do you know anybody who knows any like good boxing coaches? And he asked his buddy, and his buddy got back to me and found a hole in the wall, old school boxing gym, like not a class gym, a straight boxing gym.
Yeah, right.
And we train Monday and Thursday for an hour in the morning, and it's just awesome. It's a better situation than I had in Connecticut in regards to just like, it's an old school boxing gym, duct tape around bags, like shit you'd see in Rocky. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And he works me too. He works me. I love it. That's exactly what I want.
That's you're in Dallas now, right? You guys moved down to Dallas, or
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah, because I just recently went through a move as well from Illinois to Arizona, so I know all about that moving and packing.
It's no joke, dude.
Packing
Packing was easy. When packing, you're throwing stuff in boxes, like loading it in, you're gone. And then when you unpacking, you're like, where's my computer monitor?
It's so stressful.
What part of the year did you move? Was it summer?
Yeah.
Oh man. This guy moved down here dead. We're in Arizona. We're in Phoenix. So we're in the hottest part of the country. He moves dead smack in the middle of summer. And, here we are unpacking his gym, into his garage from a trailer. It's like 120 degrees outside. So if you are planning on a cross-country move to a warmer part of the country, do it in the winter. Do not do it in the summer. Do it in the winter.
But on the flip side of that, if we were to move in the winter from Illinois to a pack, is terrible.
The snow, yeah.
I don't know what's worse. I don't even know what's worse at that point.
Oh, dude, the snow's way worse. Let me tell you, being in Texas right now and enjoying this like 70-degree weather, 75-degree weather, while Connecticut's like 30s and 20s, all set.
Yeah.
Done with that forever.
Yep.
Definitely, man.
Yep.
I will scorch before I ever put a winter coat on again.
Hey, that's how
exactly
we are.
What I said.
That's exactly what we are. I mean, I moved from Illinois like 6 or 7 years ago now. And everybody's like, oh, are you going back? And I'm like, the only time I'm ever going back over there is to see my brother and my goddaughter. That's it. There's nothing of me that wants to feel that weather ever again, because Chicago weather can get pretty rough. So I'm sure you know from Connecticut as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Another question from this guy named Drew. How beneficial is insulin for putting on muscle?
I personally don't think it is I think there's way more hype behind than its effectiveness.
Right.
I do. I just haven't seen it. Most people I know who use it just get super fat. Because they're like, oh man, I'll just slam a bunch of insulin and carbohydrates, and then it'll shuttle and make the muscles bigger. And really, what happens? That initial feeling you get super saturated with glycogen, and when you have high insulin in your body and your body's storing carbs, you bloat with water and you feel so big. I mean,
Right.
I've had clients, like, I let them do their own thing in regards to insulin. Like, do I want anything to do with that? You can do it. Just let me know what you're doing so I can do the food.
Yeah.
And they end up blowing up this huge weight, and then when they time to prep, it just all goes away. It's all just water and fat. Now, if an individual is a hard gainer, meaning they have the very difficult time gaining weight, then I might possibly suspect that there's a possibility they have insulin resistance. If they have insulin resistance and their blood glucose and their fasting in the morning is becoming higher, or their postprandial blood glucose is becoming higher, then you need to address that issue, because that's going to be a hindrance of your growth.
Right.
So you have to address that either by removing what is causing insensitivity, which is growth, or some people do is they incorporate metformin to increase insulin resistance, or they will treat it with an exogenous form of insulin to address that insulin issue. Insulin resistance issue, and that blood glucose is starting to rise. Now, do I think that like taking like 50, 60 units of insulin, like some people are doing, like way above normal, and just eating carbohydrates to feed the insulin, is going to incredibly grow muscle?
Yeah.
No, I don't see it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Like I read about it and like read the mechanism, and then Jewett has a great blurb about it, and I'm totally in lines with him. It's like, if you use insulin to combat the issue that's holding you back. Just taking a ton of insulin just doesn't seem to occur. I mean, I know a lot of people who have grown 280 pounds without any insulin, and I know that's genetics too, but they weren't having insulin resistance. I just don't think it's as useful as people make it out to be. And every time somebody uses it who thinks it's awesome and uses it, they're usually disappointed.
Yeah.
They feel great on it, like, oh man, the pumps are great. And then come showtime next year, they're like, I only gained 4 pounds of muscle. I don't understand.
Yeah. Is it more beneficial if you're stay leaner? Like, is it more beneficial to use insulin while you're leaner than if you're like really deep in the off season and you have, accumulated some body fat on you? Is it at that point kind of like you shouldn't be using any insulin at all?
Yeah, well, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to give you an answer, like to understanding how that theory would be, right?
Yeah.
So when you are leaner, you generally have a better appetite, you feel better, you move better, you sleep better. So therefore, eating a large quantity of food becomes easier. Everybody knows that once they reach a certain body fat, pumps usually decrease, you don't feel as good, appetite goes down, and that's representation of, ghrelin, leptin. As soon as the fat cells become so saturated, leptin will go up, ghrelin will go down, and then you lose your appetite, lose pumps, and you kind of feel like shit. So I always think that every bodybuilder should be more on the leaner side, given their genetics. If they're one that never has a six-pack in the offseason, never have, they're clearly never probably going to maintain a six-pack in the offseason. So their body fat percent might go to 16. But when you take insulin and you are already fat, you're going to store a lot more water within the around the fat cells, because fat cells can swell, right? We've all seen people like, they're in the off season, a little watery, a little chubby, and then they go out and eat a large meal and they look at their stomach like, holy shit, what is this? And then like 3 days it's gone, right? But if you're really lean and you eat that, you look down, you don't see that. So I do think there is some merit to being on the leaner side with using insulin, but not to any degree to being like, I'm going to do 50 units. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
People measure it wrong. People get confused when they're measuring growth hormone and insulin. They're like, oh, 4 units of growth. No, it's 40 units of insulin. And they fuck themselves up. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. I've heard so many stories about that.
Too.
I've had it happen to me where it was a total accident. I was mid prep, and I grabbed the wrong thing, and I was so foggy and out of it. I ended up putting in 40 units of insulin into me instead of 4
Yeah.
IUs of growth hormone.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, that
people who are
was
using it, separate it.
yeah,
2 different parts of the
yeah.
fridge.
That
Yeah.
was a very dumb move by me, and yeah, it's one of those
But
things
that's
like
the
don't
thing.
do it.
Like,
Yeah,
it's great that you shared that, because people listening,
yeah,
tips on that is don't keep it in the same spot in the fridge,
yeah,
right? One, insulin has a smell. It smells, right?
right,
Yeah. Right.
That's one way you can identify it. And two, it's like separate it, pay attention, and
yeah,
never preload them. Some
yeah.
people I know like preload everything. It's like
Hmm.
you preload everything, you look and you're like, wait, which one's which? You know what I mean?
Right.
They're
Yeah.
both clear liquid. You know what I mean? What do you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that one was that one was in a little vial. It wasn't like one of those preloaded pens where you just click it. So
Yeah, like the
anyway,
Humulin R vial.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that was exactly what I used too. That anyway, don't do it.
Luckily it wasn't Humalog.
No.
Right.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was
Right.
yeah.
It had a deadly smell.
Let's keep those separate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What else you got?
I've had that conversation with a lot of people,
Yeah,
a lot of my other pro friends about insulin, and like they could say the same thing to me. They're like, man, I used it a few times, and I thought it was great, but then like after a while, it's kind of like I just feel like shit, and I fall asleep on it, and then I get chubby,
hmm,
and
Yeah.
then then you hear all these stories of like it makes people huge, but it's like I haven't met anybody.
it
I
does.
just
It
haven't
has
met
that
anybody.
aura around it. It has like a lot of people talk to me like, oh, I want to get huge this off season. I'm gonna throw in some insulin, and it has this aura around it. It really does. Because at some point, I was the same way. I thought that it's like this magical drug. Because when you read behind it, you're like, holy shit, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily translate on paper. Once you start
Correct.
using it, yeah. Where on
A lot
paper
of
it
things don't
sounds so
translate on
great.
paper.
Yeah.
I love when people do their first cycle and they're like, I ran like chest, deck, and D-ball, and like, I saw in William Llewellyn's anabolic steroid guide, you can gain like 30 pounds of sheer mass. He's like, I gained 7. I'm like, dude,
That's good.
it
You
doesn't
had good
it doesn't
results.
translate. Like it rarely does a drug profile translate into its awesomeness in real life. Rarely. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Right.
It just really does. And like growth hormone is another one of those clout things where a lot of people like, they come over and they whisper, they're like, I'm gonna bring in growth hormone this year. It's gonna be a game changer. And then like 6 months later, they're like, I think my growth's fake, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I just got numb hands and I got more pumps, and like I'm really tired all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh God. Good times.
That's funny.
What are your thoughts on growth hormone?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it definitely. I think most underground crap is garbage. I really
Yeah.
do. I think growth hormone is a very useful tool in the realm of bodybuilding. I
Yeah.
do. And especially when it's used in synergistic effect with anabolics. I actually did a whole paper on this in my master's degree. I chose growth hormone as an ergogenic aid to write about it.
Oh, cool.
And, growth hormone by itself over and over again shows studies it did nothing. It changed body fat.
Yeah.
It, supposedly lowered inflammation, maybe reduced injuries in certain athletes, but it didn't equate to more muscle strength, size, or anything after 12 weeks or 6 months of use. But when combined with androgenic anabolic steroids, the studies have shown that it did have a synergistic effect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that process. I'm not going to start like I do. And I think as you get older, I think it's more beneficial in regards like, is an 18-year-old going to run growth hormone and feel amazing? Their growth is already pumping really high as it is, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's a useful tool. The hardest part with people is like I tell people like, hey, should I use growth? I'm like, do you have a pharmacy grade hookup? No, I got this like random like green tops. I'm like,
Green tops. Yeah. Right.
I
Green
don't
tops
know,
are
man.
the
Yellow
best.
tops, orange tops, purple tops. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know.
Now,
It's like per
right.
batch. You never know if a batch is good or who's carrying it, or if
Oh,
it got
man.
denatured or got destroyed. Because
Yeah.
I've seen so many things where people claim like, oh, this particular blue top sequence is amazing, and then someone runs a bunch of it and was like, dude, I have no side effects. I have no fat, chubby hands or anything. And then the next guy run the same things like, bro, I can't close my hands, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot.
It is. Growth hormones in
Now,
this.
now, what do you think about beneficial as far as prep off season? What's the best time to run it in your opinion?
Both.
Well, it's useful in both regards.
Yeah.
It really is. There's no question. I mean, I do feel that in prep when it's used, I feel the body does get in shape quicker.
Right.
It's not like quicker like when people would take Clen quicker, where you're like, oh my God, I'm dropping a bunch of fat really quickly in the first 2 weeks of using clenbuterol.
Yeah.
I'm more representation of saying that like overall there was like less snags, less plateaus,
Okay.
you know, potentially.
Right.
But dude, this is more like anecdotal than me supporting like legit data. I just feel that way. I also think that the growth gives the body a more 3D look.
Yeah,
you get more of a round,
fuller,
fullness look
round
to the
look.
physique. Yep. Yeah, even on low carbs, you'd be like 0 carbs, 2 hours of cardio. I'm like, dude, your shoulders are still wicked round, you know?
Right.
And that's just how these drugs affect the body.
So hypothetically speaking, if you can afford it, just run it all year. Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, hypothetically, yeah. And then there's another funny thing too about doses. You know, people ask about that. Like, dude, I heard these guys are taking 12 IUs of growth.
Jesus.
There's no fucking way they're taking 12 IUs of farm grade growth hormone.
No.
There's no way.
You
wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah, a balloon. You'd just walk around like a blown up balloon. Yeah.
You'd feel horrible. Oh my God. I know a couple people they're like, bro, I got to like 6 IUs, and they're like, I couldn't even hold a dumbbell in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
You can't train if you can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's tough. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got one more. I got one more question from Instagram, and it's as you know, being a female, is it beneficial for, or should I say, do females need to use PEDs to be on the pro level, to compete on the pro stage?
No. Nowadays, if you're genetically gifted, no. And once you need to be competitive as a pro, 130%. Well, also, in what division are we talking here, right?
Right.
Women's physique, not a chance. Figure today, probably not a chance.
Right.
I mean, I turned a figure girl pro, and she didn't use anything. But this was a long time ago. And if you look at Jenny Lynn figure, Mr. Olympia, and you look at figure now, it looks like two different categories.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So in regards to this, I'll tell you this. If you're genetically freakish, you could probably turn professional bikini and not use anything if you're a freak. But there's a lot of bikini girls using a lot of drugs. Figure, could you turn pro if you're a freak in the Masters? Maybe.
Yeah. Right.
But not as likely. And to compete as a pro, not a chance in figure. And do well. And women's physique, forget it.
I agree.
Forget it.
The
progression of the sport. It's the progression of the sport. Yeah. It's just progression.
Yeah.
You know?
How about figure girls look crazy nowadays?
Oh yeah, insane. Have bigger arms than me. Devil's advocate. How about guys? Is there any? Obviously, we're not talking bodybuilding. We're talking lower classes. Obviously, open body, but you're not going to be an open bodybuilder when you're not on PEDs.
No, men's physique guys have slipped through.
Yeah,
for sure. No, yeah, classic. Forget it.
Yeah,
there's no way. Especially now. Classic 4 years ago.
Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Not now. Not now. Classic is getting. If you guys notice, Classic is getting way more competitive every year. Mm-hmm. Drastically.
Yep.
It's like, and look at some of these guys. I'm like, this is amateur level. I'm like, these guys would have smoked the Olympia Winter Classic like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. You know.
Yeah.
Ain't that crazy?
The whole sport is pushing forward. Every division is just getting harder. Every division's getting bigger. It's not slowing down.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like people talk about like, oh, it's IFBB's fault for doing this. All sports are progressive. Freestyle motocross is bonkers. Racing's bonkers. Football's bonkers. Everything is better, faster, stronger, more risky, dangerous, etc. And like, and when it comes to like a sport that's built on being as shredded as possible, as balanced as possible, as big as possible, it's like
That's a no-brainer.
The judging criteria of what it is makes it progressive.
Right.
Right? Because how do you say, besides putting a height to weight cap, how do you say enough's enough for open bodybuilding? You can't, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I tell people, there's too much money involved, especially in pro sports.
Yeah.
And to not be on the same level of playing field as some of these people that are taking drugs. And so it's almost like they're forcing their hand to like just to get that same money that they're getting. They're like, man, I got to take drugs just to compete with this guy. Like baseball contracts. That's generational money right there, And that's how I think.
Generational money.
Yeah,
It is.
right.
50 million.
Yeah.
Right.
I hear these guys' contracts are like, he signed a $48 million $48 million contract?
Yeah.
What?
Right. Yeah.
You guys
Oh,
think
shit.
that's bad? Look at golf players. Did you see the prize money that's involved in golf? They make like hundreds of millions of dollars per year for like a few
Dude,
golf
that's
tournaments.
the sport to be in.
It is.
You don't got to take
100%.
drugs, and you don't got to get hit. You don't got to
That's
get punched
it.
in the face.
Yeah.
You don't got to take drugs.
Right. And you're making, top level Olympian makes, if he makes $1 million from an endorsement deal and his prize money from the Olympia, he makes $1 million, let's call it. And then you got him playing a golf tournament, he placed 15th and he got 5 million. You know what I mean? It's just the difference there is huge. One more thing that we missed that I think we should really quickly touch on. I know we've had you on for a while, but health subs, or preventative supplements, whatever people call it these days. Is there something to be said for them? Or is it something that like was kind of created as a Band-Aid in our industry? We're like, oh, we're running extremely high amounts of gear, but it's cool because we're taking, Tudka, or we're taking, milk thistle. We're good,
People do that all the time. It's a tough one, dude. I can say that there are a lot of over-the-counter supplements, not a lot, but there's some that can really help your LDLs. We all know red yeast rice. It is a statin. It's a statin. It's simvastatin, which is, people don't know, it's the same sort of type of drug as in Lipitor, and that will crush your LDL pretty low. But you could possibly have side effects with it. And the other aspect of red yeast rice people don't realize is the amount of statin per 800 milligrams, say, of red yeast rice varies from supplement to supplement.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going on consumerlab.com. I prescribed them a long time ago. They test all the supplements to see if the label matches. And, a good percent of the labels don't match. Supplement companies usually cheap out in the ingredients. But anyway, they're testing the amount of simvastatin there was, I think, per 1,000 milligrams of red yeast rice. And they were all over the place. Mm-hmm. One was like 40 milligrams of simvastatin. One was like not traceable, 2.5 milligrams, 4 milligrams. So obviously you're going to have varying results with supplementing with red yeast rice in the attempt to lower your LDL. There's a couple brands that are pretty good, that work really well. I can't even think of the top of my mind. It's like some off brand. It's a time extended release one. It brought my LDL down, I think, 65 points in 4 weeks.
Wow.
And I didn't change my diet at all because it is a statin. And then, of course, citrus bergamot seems to be pretty promising in lowering LDL. And in some studies, larger doses have been shown to increase HDL. NAC is pretty decent for the liver. Now, back to your question in regards to like, are these supplements a invisible shield to these drugs? No. But I mean, they can be implemented to help lower liver enzymes, assist in, glutathione replenishment in the liver, which is good for you, but nothing's going to counteract taking 100 milligrams of Anadrol,
Dang it.
And the thing is this, your liver can be under stress sometimes and still show moderately elevated liver enzymes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Like I've seen people in the hospital with like near cirrhosis, and their liver enzymes were just slightly elevated. And I've also seen somebody in the hospital with cirrhosis and liver enzymes were like 1,000, like way up there,
Yeah.
But I think the biggest merit in regards to over-the-counter supplements that would be effective is the LDL lowering ones. I really do, because you're seeing it. It's happening. Your blood work is proved. It's better.
Yeah.
You're lowering your cardiovascular risk. Is these liver supplements, you taking them in combination of taking anabolic steroids, is that going to protect your liver, prevent it from getting damaged or do anything? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then the other one, where people take all these supplements for kidney health. For kidney, I don't have an answer to that, and I don't have really strong belief that they do, because if they did, why on earth wouldn't the FDA swoop those up, take them off the market, and be like, these are drugs we're going to be using with our chronic kidney disease patients?
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they really did work that well, like truly that well, they would patent them and they would take them from the market and make tons of money on them, because any drug that does work, that's why they're taking NAC off the market, because it
Right.
does work. They take it right off the market. And the only reason red yeast rice, it was still on the market, because I know they tried to take it off, is because they if you look at the supplement itself, it doesn't say anything about lipids. It doesn't say anything about cholesterol. It says nothing, because it can't.
Right.
And they have to say red yeast rice. They can't say cholesterol lowering effect. They can't say heart healthy. They can't say anything like that. It's just red yeast rice. So therefore, by the law, it sneaks right in. So the FDA can't attack it.
Interesting.
How about like blood pressure? There's like cardiotone, and there's blood pressure. Is that something that's beneficial? Obviously, like if you constantly have high blood pressure, I mean that's not going to help
Very
you.
bad.
It's very bad for you, and that's not going to help you. But are you? It's hard to say with these things, but are you like? How do I word this so people don't get mad? Should you rely on those things to have your blood pressure in check?
This is the deal, right? This is the deal. So you're taking your blood pressure, and this is the bottom line. Sometimes when your blood pressure is slightly elevated, your doctor is going to say, this is not treatable. Of course, because they give you blood pressure med, it's going to go too low.
Right.
They're going to tell you, whatever you're doing, knock it off, because you're borderline.
Right.
So in that case, over-the-counter supplements that help lower blood pressure can probably help you drop 10 points, right? And that's an improvement, and that's good. Now, if you're way up there, if you're sporting 170 over 90, you're probably going to need, a prescribed blood pressure medication. I've had numerous clients myself, and their blood pressure gets up there, or they come to me, the blood pressure is high, and I'm like, dude, you got to go to your doctor.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take blood pressure medication. Well, then you got to stop taking steroids then. Well, I don't want to do that. I'm like, dude, you got to decide what you want to do here, because you can't be walking around with blood pressure like that.
No.
Because I know you're not scared of your heart dying, but it sucks to have your kidneys fail. Because if you've ever been to it, I spent whole rotations in dialysis clinics. It's a very sad place.
Yeah.
And it's very preventable. Just go get it done. And they go get like a low dose of lisinopril, and they're like, oh, I feel fine. I feel great. I'm like, yeah, dude, that easy, man.
Yeah.
Right.
And the doctor will prescribe it right away. The only problem is sometimes what's annoying with certain doctors is they don't want to give you lisinopril for some reason. They want to give something else. And they're like, oh, let's start you with hydrochlorothiazide. No, let's not. Let's do something else,
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then with that being said, when you're getting your blood work done or your labs, should you be not taking any kind of over-the-counter health supplements for a certain amount of time, so you can get like your true value, or do you just want to keep rocking those?
I'm so glad you did this. So I just did a whole continuing education piece. I was presenting it to nurse practitioners and other people about bodybuilding and labs, what to see, because a lot of times when a doctor sees our labs, they freak out. They're like, whoa, liver enzymes, whoa, little elevated. We need to get a liver biopsy. We need to do a scan, an ultrasound of your liver. And it's like, no, dude, it's just some weight training. So I did a bunch of research on a bunch of studies. Weight training elevates ALT and AST. It does. Muscle breakdown does, period. It can even elevate it significantly in some people. And you can even have abnormal high levels of creatinine, which will artificially bring down your EGFR. Your CPK levels can be through the roof. So it's good to if you really want to get an accurate reading on your labs, do not weight train at all for 5 to 7 days prior to your blood draw. Make sure your diet's consistent. Don't use a cheat meal the day before your blood labs. Your triglycerides might be abnormally high the next day. Right. Avoid red meat the day before. Make sure you go and fasted 10 hours at least before your blood draw. Make sure you're hydrated leading up to the blood labs. In other words, 3 liters, 3.5 liters, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, you get your labs. Before you go into the labs, maybe drink a liter and then go get your lab. If you go in dehydrated, you're going to get wacky numbers. They're going to be falsely elevated. Some of them are that are influenced with hydration. If you eat red meat the night before, a large steak, there's a high chance that your creatinine level might be higher than normal in the morning. If you go in not fasted, your creatinine level, your triglycerides, your blood glucose might be higher than normal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going to look at your kidney values, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, my creatinine's too high. My EGFR is low. What's going on? And then if you go out and you get an accurate reading, it can. But eating, I saw these studies where they did studies with eating meat, red meat, and eating red meat, and they checked their blood at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and it's something like blood levels of creatinine levels peaked at 60 minutes after ingestion of red meat before coming back down. Which it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a normal response to your body clearing
ingesting it, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
But if people are not aware of those things, they're going to think it's off. And then your doctor's going to freak, or you're going to freak. Then you have to do another blood lab value to make sure everything's okay. It's better just to prepare for it, do it, so you have an accurate reading, so your doctor doesn't freak out and you don't freak out. Because I can't tell you how many times this always happens. My doctor's really concerned about my liver enzymes. I'm like, what are they? 57 and 62. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, dude, did you train the day before? Yeah, I trained legs. I'm like, come on. And then the doctor wants to order all these tests and so forth. It's better to adjust for it. And those of you guys listening who are very big, very muscular, ask your doctor to request a cystatin C to help estimate your EGFR. It's a way of using use that to estimate your GFR that doesn't take into account muscle turnover in the body, and it's not affected as much by inflammation either. So you get a true indicator of where you are on your EGFR.
Yeah.
Because if you're a muscular guy and you eat protein, you train, your creatinine is going to be in the higher level, higher limit of the higher end of normal.
Yeah.
Which is going to bring your EGFR down.
Very interesting.
Gotcha.
How about
and the supplements too?
Yeah.
Back you said the supplements is I would recommend stopping them.
Okay.
Because
Fair
if
enough.
something's off and you did all of that, then you're going to be scratching your head being like, I don't know why they're off. They shouldn't be, because if you're not doing orals and you haven't done this, done that, then what's the explanation? I mean, let's be honest, guys. There's certain supplement companies that add shit in there that shouldn't be in there. They do. It happens. So, I'm sure you guys heard of what was that? What was that pre-workout that I took off the market a couple years ago?
There's a few.
Remember all the liver failure? They had liver failure.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that one.
Yeah, it was a supplement. It was a famous one, and they got pulled off, and that's something like 13 people had severe damage.
Was that like Brainiac or something? It was something like Brainiac or Psychotic or
Mesomorph.
Something, dude. I just remember reading about it and being like, they directly linked it to that supplement. All these people were taking the supplement.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Contamination does happen, man.
Oh, I bet.
Right.
All right, Chris. Well, we kept you on long enough. I mean, we could go on for days with this stuff, but it's information that definitely needs to be heard. And obviously, if we have these questions or if other people have these questions, I'm sure a million other people have thought the same thing at some point. So we appreciate you coming on, clarifying a few things, and, being a good voice for health and bodybuilding, because it's something that's definitely overlooked by a lot of people, whether they mean to do it or if they don't mean to do it. I've done it before personally. I've been one of those guys, when I started, I was like, who cares? I'll do 7 shows in a year. I'll keep going. I'm feeling great, out of sight, out of mind type of deal. So it's something that definitely needs to be talked about more often, and needs to just be out there. And these questions need to be answers for people. So we appreciate you coming on and giving us your time and knowledge. We greatly appreciate that.
Yeah. Can I say something in closing real quick?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So listen, guys, some people might take it, what I'm saying is a negative aspect of the sport and everything like that. Listen, I love bodybuilding. Bodybuilding's great. But I can tell you that anybody getting into bodybuilding, you just have to understand the risks. I just think there's a huge deficit of knowledge of understanding the risks associated with what people are doing today, because what people are doing, a lot of people, not everybody, is much more extreme than it needs to be. Health parameters are not being checked. They're being ignored. And I think they need to be. Just understand and know the risks before you're doing what you're doing. And don't be surprised when people pass away in the sport, because I'm not. I get blown up and people are like, what do you want from me? It's like, dude, it's another person. Like, get ready. There's going to be a lot more. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And hopefully a lot of, people talking about it and seeing this going on, people might take it more seriously. And that's one thing I've been more outspoken about it, is because, I mean, at this point in time, somebody's got to say something and start talking about it on a more health regimented, because this is not a healthy sport by any means. And there's ways to mitigate some risk. You can't mitigate all the risk, of course, right? You can't get rid of all of it, but you can do what you can and make the best decisions if you want to continue down this road. And that's what I have to say about that. But just know what you're doing, and don't be, it's sad to say. And like, one of my good friends growing up racing motocross, he got addicted to drugs bad, heroin, crack. And listening to him justify the use of the drugs he has sounds exactly like a lot of bodybuilders. Bro, these guys are my friends. Like, if you just do it like this, it's not a problem. Like, we have this protocol we use. We don't overdose, like that. And I'm like, look at this dude. I'm like, bro, you hear yourself? And then you hear bodybuilders be like, oh, well, so-and-so's been bodybuilding 50 years, and I'll just double my dose of that, and I'll cover my lipids, and my liver's fine, so I'll do this, and do my blood works, that, everything's great. And they kind of scapegoat it to make themselves feel better. And then when they have a baby health scare, they lose their mind,
Right.
But just don't be like that. Just accept the risks and accept the consequences that might come with it. And then I got no problem with it. Other than that, just know what you're doing.
Right.
Right. And I just want to close real quick. Guys, I got a new product coming out. I've been working with over a while. It's an enhanced flavor system, which has a little bit of minerals in it. It's great. I've been working on it. We've been matching the flavors, so you guys can see that coming out soon. It's called Drink Pew. You can find it on Instagram. But I'm really excited about it, man. There's a whole premise behind it and why I developed it. But it should be out in the next few months. Hopefully, if we get this flavor system right, it's just got to be perfect.
Yeah.
And then my Instagram handle is IFBB PRO Chris Tuttle. I have my website, Tuttle Nutrition, but I'm just going to tell everybody right now, I'm not accepting any more clients at all. Zero, zilch, nobody. I'm not even going to add anybody to a wait list. I just can't take on any more people. That's it. I get, after these podcasts, I get so many messages, and like, I feel bad, but like, I just can't. I can't work any more hours than I am.
Hey,
I'm sure.
I just can't.
It's better that you do that way than take on a lot of people and just do what you've mentioned earlier with just not being able to handle it all. All right, fair enough.
No.
All right, Chris, we appreciate your time, and that is it for this one. Thank you, guys.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Thanks, Chris. Yep. Take it easy, man.
Thanks.